When it comes to a series that has as many games as Professor Layton does, there's gonna be some range. Not every adventure will be better than the last, not every story will be as good as the next. While all the Layton games are worth playing, there are clear winners and losers, so let's put it on paper. Today we're gonna rank the Professor Layton games from worst to best. I'm only covering games released outside of Japan, so I'm sorry, because I know everyone was really looking forward to Professor Layton Royale's spot. And keep in mind as we go through this, I'm up to game number 4, so this is not entirely my footage. A lot of what I'm using are Dearest Herschel's HD uploaded cutscenes. Shout out to him and everything he's done for this fan base. As always, it's just my opinion. I will keep it as spoiler free as possible, so let's get it started. I know I just said in the intro that every game is worth playing, but
it was all a lie. Guys, it was all a lie.
The totally and completely necessary 7th game we all begged for. I trash on Layton's mystery journey a lot, however, it is also important for me as someone who criticizes it to inform you that I didn't finish it, which might sound obvious, but it's actually really hard for me to quit a game, and it rarely happens. This one, though, this was a special case. It starts off with Catriel, daughter of legendary Professor Layton, looking for him because he's gone missing. I guess that's what dads do, but you don't see me having a game about my childhood. This dog talked a lot, this boy was pitifully one-dimensional, Catriel Layton has none of her old man's charm, and she's kind of a savage. And things might get going for these characters later, but still. Why did level 5 feel it necessary to shove Layton's already pretty much daughter to the side in favor of someone new? This could have been a great chance to backseat the professor and actually have Flora do something for once, as well as be familiar to returning players, but they blew it all up. Maybe because they wanted it to seem contained and therefore friendly for newcomers. Nothing scares off a newcomer like needing to play 6 games first. And with everything else new, yeah, it does kind of take the shape of a reboot. But a reboot that damages the professor's character with horrendously soft puzzles, which for me is the biggest draw. Everything about this game feels like level 5 was just trying to continue milking the Layton cow without giving it the proper nutrients. I did, for some reason, buy it on Switch. I guess to support level 5 in their desperate hour. Because even at your lowest level 5, I'll still love and support you. That's what good dads do. Take that, Catriel. Long before we had Ace Attorney vs. Professor Layton in the West, we had Layton Brothers Mystery Room. It's a mobile spin-off and straight-up departure where you play as Professor Layton's son, and when I say that I'm lying, really you play as his assistant, Lucy Baker, whose novice eyes correlate a little window for us. This is a 10-year-old game, which is weird because I played it on my first smartphone, and it looked better then. It's not exactly modernized in this footage. I'm playing on a Google Pixel 7, and the portraits are aliasing, and so are the titles. Get on it, level 5. Now, I want everyone to listen here because this part is important. It's not a bad game, but it's really not a Professor Layton game. This could be because in development, level 5 all of a sudden decided to shift an original project into Layton's skin, or because he's not in the game, or because the plot twist actually makes sense and is feasible. Regardless, it's a charming spin-off that's a brief, enjoyable experience. Just don't show up expecting anything familiar from the rest of the series. Probably the closest thing I can compare it with is Ace Attorney, where each case involves a homicide that you investigate and call people out on using their own words. Lucy and Alfendi kinda have a Nick and Maya cat and mouse style relationship that's very amusing to watch grow. And some of the characters even do the name thing. But I tell you what, the soundtrack, oh god, the soundtrack.
You like jazz?
Transitioning your series to a new system is hard, but for Professor Layton, it sorta had the perfect time slot. People were already getting tired of the 2D formula, every Layton game was the same with different flavor of the week scenarios, so coming upon the 5th game, it needed a change. And lo and behold, it just so happened that the 3DS would be launching the next year, so level 5 took the difficult task of remodeling the series, creating something brand new to be appreciated as modern Layton, and it looked like this. I don't mind the 3D models personally, but the motion captured cutscenes are a bit overboard. It's like if you had stick figures in VR, it's just so uncanny. I'm sure level 5 realized that since this was the only game to feature them, but unfortunately, Miracle Mask also suffers from just a very bland and predictable plot. And the chapter, you guys know the chapter. We'll talk about this again soon when I get into the last Spectre/Spectre's Call retrospective. retrospector. But the second trilogy of Professor Layton feels like Level 5 was wanting to get back to their JRPG roots, where the adventure, travel, and fantasy aspects were overtaking the mystery itself. Not to mention, this might be a hot take, this was the point where they were starting to bloat the professor's past and character, like Layton with an afro, okay. I don't think these flashbacks were as insightful or interesting to who the professor is. They help with the plot, they teach us how he learned to sword fight, but I don't know, let me move on to the good stuff. Miracle Mask takes the biggest step in the series in terms of content and direction. It's got like 1 billion puzzles, some using the 3DS's new features. And while people may diss the 3D character models, I never heard anyone complain about how much more lively the backgrounds look, Monte d'Or especially. You can really feel how popping of a city this is, and I would never think this kind of atmosphere switch up in Layton would work, but they pulled it off. Despite the flaws, the effort put into this game is undeniable, so it's still a solid entry that everyone should play. Having been inspired by Phoenix Wright, Professor Layton eventually got to be so big that a crossover with him was extremely ideal. The potential between the two was limitless, and the gameplay wasn't super unrelated either, so wrapping the two up into a neat little fusion would be big bucks. And the game, it's okay. Let me make something very clear before this. I love Professor Layton, and I love Phoenix Wright, and I love their game a lot together. But within their series, I would choose most Professor Laytons or Ace Attorneys over this game. This is essentially an Ace Attorney plot with a Professor Layton third act twist, or an Ace Attorney game but instead of investigating Professor Layton puzzles. I don't know, it's weird. It's just that both sides are too welcoming to the other. The courtroom mechanics are very easy, even with the new gimmick for this game, and the puzzles are simply brain dead. To anyone who's played both series, the main takeaway will probably be the fan service, especially from the Ace Attorney side. Boy, was I happy to see some of these faces again. But to anyone who's played just one or the other, you are the main target here so that they can softly dip you into the water. And that's actually why I love this game. Layton has always been a series that brought in both old and young demographics, hardcore gamers and casual gamers. Introduction is its specialty, and now we were building that bridge with Ace Attorney, which is a series that makes being a lawyer sound fun. Do you see what I'm saying here? It's special just for helping fans to join hands, but I have one last criticism. They whip out Professor Layton's theme way too much. It used to be special in the old games. It was reserved and played once a game for that big moment when Layton was unraveling the enemy and saving the day. In this game, it plays every time Layton opens his mouth, and it's like...
So what's the story behind this Elysian box anyway?
There is something uniquely captivating about Professor Layton and the Azran legacy. If you ignore everything about this game and focus on just the fact that it was touted as the end of traditional Professor Layton, it's wild. Going through this felt crazy, not even for any plot reasons, just when the music starts you think to yourself, damn, this is really the last game, huh? And it was pretty well documented at the time that there was more Layton ahead, but without Layton. So everything in this game felt incredibly sentimental. I won't spoil, but it has easily the greatest and most rewarding post-credits scene there is to anyone who stuck around for all the games. But I'm sure that same crowd could also tell you that it feels the least like Professor Layton. With its nomadic objectives and just sudden importance of new characters and even the main focus of the plot. In one corner, I do believe it tries too hard, but in the other, I remind myself that it was the last chance it had. Wrapping up the trilogy that was already just whatever, things get incredibly, well, honestly, unforgettable, which is funny considering there are 3 more games after this and they never referenced any of it. Azran Legacy is not the perfect conclusion, which is why it's not the actual conclusion, but it's an excellent top-off for the prequels. For those who know what it was and what it stands for, how can you not shed tears during the credits sequence? When that song begins to play and you realize that is it, or that was it. Damn. Powerful in a special way. Oh yeah, the puzzles. Yeah, they're alright. We'll talk more about this someday, probably. Maybe 2025 at the earliest. 4 games in the last of the 2D era, Last Spectre/Spectre's Call almost feels like a return to form, but under different circumstances. Going with your partner to investigate a quaint little village with a big mystery, gaining a friend along the way, and being attacked by some random person who has it out for us. It is the start of a new trilogy after all, so its similarities to Curious Village aren't coincidental, but I guess that was an issue for everyone else. From what I gather, most of Last Spectre's criticism is because it feels unnecessary and cheap, as the game kinda had to follow up the beloved conclusion that was Unwound Future. It just didn't do anything to make the idea of starting a new trilogy seem like an interesting one, but I'm sitting pretty comfy on that fence. Not only do I adore the puzzles and music in this game, not only do I think calming everything down was a beneficial change of pace for Professor Layton, not only do I value the origin story for the franchise's most iconic team-up, this game has something that sets it apart from everything else, and that is Yokai Wow. Almost made it through the whole video. It's got this side mode, it's called London Life. It never came out in Europe, but it's this like neat little 16-bit sim RPG. Just wait. Professor Layton in the Unwound Future, or Professor Layton in the Lost Future, is an amazing game that I just talked about for like an hour. I'm sorry, I'm gonna cut this one really short. Do I even need to explain this Shakespearean masterpiece? Great story, even greater characters. The original ending to the most epic of sagas. It's pretty fantastic, not gonna lie. Yo, this bussin'. The most rich and pure Professor Layton experience to be had is none other than that of the first game, where we're introduced to a professor and his apprentice researching a mystery in a town not on a map. They pull up, and the buildings look like this, and the air sounds like this. The citizens are strange. They all seem to have a form of amnesia and paranoia. The tower at the center is creepy and looks like gravity pushed a bunch of houses together, Katamari style. It is no longer just the village that is curious, but me. And I fulfill that curiosity in the form of some extremely difficult puzzles. Okay, level 5, let's tone it down a little. Hino took his love for game making and puzzle books, met Tago, and made history. Curious Village does everything that a first game should do, and I don't mean the first game in the series, I mean the first game in the genre, showing us how two simple worlds could so easily collide and work together. And was it perfect? No, but in exactly 1 year, it would be. It's pretty depressing music for a final reveal, I know. But it is rare you see a series outshine itself so early in its life. Professor Layton said, "Give me 2 games. One to introduce and pioneer the premise, and the second to perfect it." The diabolical box, the Pandora's box, whatever you want to call it. In this game, the imagination is allowed to run so wild. The professor and Luke board a train to investigate a murder and discover a metropolitan downfall. What lies ahead is twists and turns that stretch beyond comprehension, but most importantly, it's the atmosphere that will stick with you. Fall Sense is a depressing, forgotten town trying so hard to stay what it was, and every single character you meet there makes you feel bad. This is spoiler territory. It's also the social go-abouts of the train and the almost romanticized small village life of Dropstone. Level 5 put spirit into every area of the game, and I felt more invested in these one-off characters than I did our main trio. The puzzles are also really challenging, but fun and compelling, and when I say that, I mean sliding block puzzles. And then, eventually, just sliding puzzles, as well as the infamous Tough Gang, Knight's Tour, and Disappearing Act. Which is also what Professor Layton's fatherhood special is. Half of what makes this game so special, I can't even talk about. The animation is some of the best, even to this day in the series, and I can't show you that either. This game is just so full of secrets and surprises that even if I was spoiling, it would never do it any justice. So I can't stress this enough. For those who played it, good job. And for those who haven't, go play Diabolical Box and experience the best that Layton has to offer.